So here we go. Here are all the nests that I just prepped from my Batt. So this is part 2 of showed you how to strip this down in part 1, and now I'm going to show you how I would spin it as a single textured yarn. So I'm spinning today on my Spinolution King Bee. I am a Spinolution rep. But that's not the only reason I love this wheel. I love it for its bypassable orifice, the large hooks, and then we just get along really well. So right now I have this on its sort of medium setting, and I will look up what that ratio actually is for anybody who would be interested in it. I do a lot of things by feel. That's how I dye and how I card and how I spin. So I've got my leader here. So because I'm spinning a single, and I'm going to be aiming to spin, think about a sport weight, maybe a little bit heavier, a heavy sport weight yarn. Get myself a little bit more uptake. So just attached it onto my leader, and I have a small piece. So these nests are quite long when I undo them. I'll do an example of one that's quite long. So sometimes what I'll do once I start going, you can see how long this is I'll actually split up my nest into slightly smaller pieces. So I'll have one nest on the go, and then I'll strip it down. These are kind of like faux roving, and it's definitely a woolen preparation. This type, because it's being carded on a drum carder, so the fibers are disorganized, which means they kind of crisscross each other. Also because there's so much texture going on in the Batt, it's a little more disorganized. Now that doesn't preclude spinning it in a worsted manner rather than a woolen manner. And I kind of do a little bit of a half and half. So for this one I will be doing a short backwards draw, but I'll also be smoothing with my front hand as it goes through. So to start off with, I'm going to just start treadling and just feel how the fiber is going in. So I have fairly light uptake so that I'm getting enough twist in my fiber. And the key with doing a single that's strong enough but not over twisted is to sort of look at your ply, is to do your ply back twist. And so I kind of let it go in and out, and I put a little bit more twist in my singles, especially because I'm working with multiple types of fiber. And then I work some of that extra twist out when I am washing and finishing my yarn. So I actually feel that I'm at a pretty good uptake. And in order to keep this thin, I'm just not letting a lot of fiber into the drafting area. So I'm keeping my hands pretty close together, loosening them out, and I'm keeping the draft in front, or the twist, sorry, in front of my front hand there. So I'm not letting it travel back into my drafting zone at all. And then I'm letting it, the fiber in my drafting zone slip through my front hand and introduce the twist. I like doing singles with textured yarn because I find that it really shows off the yarn quite beautifully. If you wanted a more even yarn, you can definitely ply it. Going all the way up to a 3-ply in that case, or even a Navajo ply, will help to sometimes even out your yarn. But you can see that I'm letting in some of that unevenness and texture because that is what I'm looking for with this spin. If it gets too thin, so I feel like this area might be a little too thin in my single, thinner than I'd like it to be, I just stop my wheel and I'll take some fiber from later on in my roving, or if it slipped through, and I'll just attach it as if I had broken my yarn, so to the side. So it's almost like a semi-core spun, and I just try and tread a little bit more slowly until I get that going again, and then I come back to my draft. So that type of thing, those thin areas, can happen when you get like a longer stapled fiber or fiber that slips a little bit more, and you were previously working with a bit of fiber in the Batt that had a little bit less slip, and so you were used to the kind of grip. And so with spinning a Batt like this, with the multiple textures of fibers, different slips and grips and different staple lengths, you're constantly readjusting your hand, which is why I think I favor a short backwards draft, because I'm right-handed, and it doesn't really matter which hand is in the front for anybody who's a beginner spinner. And so for me, it's very comfortable to sort of hold those fibers in my backhand, and I can control my draft like that. Because I've pre-drafted this fiber, it's fairly easy to work with. And what I'm doing is constantly readjusting the grip in my backhand. And I use a grip like this. I think lots of people probably do this. I have the fiber in my hand, and where my thumb touches, and this is the same when I do the drafting, the pre-draft is where the fiber is going to pull from. And so by shifting where my thumb is in my grip on my faux roving, I can shift where the fiber is going to go. And these thin spots are where your yarn is going to thin out, and then these bits of texture and fluff is where your yarn is going to have more texture. Or if you have like a bit of a lock that's not completely combed out or something like this tangled little probably mohair lock here, that is all going to go into your yarn as texture. And so now that I've been going for a little bit with not too much of a treadle speed, and I go backwards, I can see that it plies back on itself a little bit, but it also kind of curls, so it doesn't want to spring right back, and it's not a really tight ply back. And that tells me, just from experience, that this is going to be a perfect single for what I'm looking to do. And I do know that this yarn will bloom a little bit based on the fibers and the spring of the fibers in it. I know that I have some merino, some teeswater, some silk in here, so it is going to puff up a little bit. So I am going to end up, I think, with what I'm spinning right now as a heavier sport weight. And I do use a spinner's control card to check that. This is a weight that I've been spinning a lot recently, so I don't have a sample out on my lap, but a sample would, if you weren't sure about your consistency and you were starting out, what I would do is I'd actually break this here. I'd pull a little bit off, I'd test it against my spinner's control card or a wraps per inch card and say, okay, yes, this is the weight I want. Then I would break my yarn, and I might actually put it taped to a piece of cardboard across my lap, and I like to tape it out if I'm working with the yarn that isn't set, or tie it onto a card so I can actually see it so that it doesn't bounce back on itself and loosen up, because if you leave it, it will lose some of its twists, and you can see it get quite fluffy when it does that.